the most important thing for me is, again, like all of you, is creating that lifestyle where we're in harmony with our family, with our kids, with what we desire as an individual, with our community at large, with nature. So it's the whole perspective. And when you look at it that way, it can become really overwhelming, or it can become really simple, right? Depending on the perspective that you're taking with it. So, you know, the word quantum is thrown around a lot right now. It's kind of like a fad, trendy word of like, I'm doing quantum healing, or I'm doing quantum thinking. So I've been digging a little bit deeper into into that word itself this week, of like, what does it actually mean to be quantum, right? We talk about moving into this fifth dimensional new earth space, and what does that actually mean? What does that actually look like? Like, are we all going to die and go to another planet? Or, you know, do we stay here, and the people who aren't progressing, do they die and go to another place in the universe? Those answers I don't know. But I do know that when I tap into that energy, the world around me changes. And the stress, the stuff that I was stressed about, just literally disappears. So when I dig deeper into what quantum means, I mean, quantum really just means many, right? A lot of, many. But it's also a Latin word. So if you know, there's this book that I've been hooked on in the last couple of weeks called Phrase and Fable. And it looks at like the ancient meanings and the stories that were behind some of the phrases and the words that we've come to use in our language. And so I was doing a quick search in there of like, do they reference quantum in there? And they do a couple times, but more as acronyms that was used back in a Latin way. And the way that it's kind of discussed in that book is that quantum is as much as you like. So for example, like if you were drinking tea, you could have as much or as little tea as you want. And that really resonates with me when I think about quantum, because quantum is accessing as much or as little as you want from the energies in the world around you, right? And when we think of quantum, we often think of infinity. And when we were doing that breath meditation, they were showing me the infinity symbol moving through your bodies. So that kind of, there's no beginning and no end, right? And when we think of no beginning and no end, we think of it even in terms of time. You know, the old way of thinking about time is is linear, that we start at point A, we're going to move to point B and then to point C, and you never go back. But when you look at time from the quantum physics standpoint, it's more like a circle. No beginning and no end. I like to think of it more as a spiral. So you can spiral up, going backwards, you can spiral forwards, you can pause in the middle. And so when we're looking at time, if we start to shift our focus to time in that perspective, that means it doesn't really matter where we are in the process with our kids or with our business or whatever. It means there's always the opportunity to change. There's always the opportunity to do more or to do less. And it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means that we're shifting through. So here's the thing that's really important, I think, to understand as we try to move into quantum thinking, is that the old way of thinking about business or about life was the linear fashion, right? You do step A, step B, and step C, and then you end up where you are, okay? And we can do that, you know, with your ideas. I can walk you through that old model of like, here's step 1, step 2, step 3. And we'll probably still do a little bit of that because we're still in this old world. But the new model, quantum, is if you're on the circle, how do you know where you are on the circle? Right? There's no starting point and there's no ending point. So the only way to really step into that quantum field is to step into the center of the circle and observe all of it at the same time. Okay? And by observing it, you also change what happens in the circle, because now you've changed the element of where you're facing, right? So it's not even so much about observing as it is about being. So some of the, you know, I'm trying to unlock time right now. This is one of my big project. And how do we unlock it from the quantum perspective? And then how do we teach that to ourselves, our kids, our family members, our coworkers, right? And so I was looking at this model that's come out on time. from the quantum perspective. And what I've figured out so far is that I can't actually sit down and study it in the way I would study it in the past of like, here's how it works. Here's step one. You grasp this concept in your mind, and then you grasp this concept in your mind. The only way it's going to work is to just let the whole concept sink in. So rather than looking at it and studying it and doing all that, what I do is I take the image of this circle, right? So even if you think of the clock is a circle, right? But we think of time as a line, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, but it's actually a circle that comes around on itself, and it's balanced all the time. So I've just been sitting with the image of the clock. And if we take that image of a circle into the quantum field, it becomes a sphere. So it's no longer a 2-dimensional circle, right? It's a 3-dimensional circle. So it's like a ball in my hand. So I've been, every once in a while when I find myself getting frustrated of like, oh, we got to get this done because we have a meeting at 10 o'clock or whatever, I'm like, okay, I'm thinking of time linearly. And I just imagine, okay, let's think of it as the circle or the sphere. And that's it. And I let that energy just drop in and I let it go. Because sometimes what we hit when we're working on these ideas is we're pushing, right? This is the end point that I want in my line, is this end point over here. It's disappearing. And so I'm pushing towards that end goal. And then I get frustrated because something happens, because it's not actually a straight line of energy that we're working on, right? We're working on more of those sine waves, the ups and the downs, right? And this is going back to that Tesla understanding of the universe, the quantum understanding of the universe, is we're going up and down. So this is why I love how, Ashley, you were mentioning, right now, I'm realizing that I have these ups and downs with my cycle of energy. And that is our normal cycle of energy, is we're going to have periods of up and periods of down. And how we're approaching our problems needs to flow with that organic flow of the up and the down, right? And when we find ourselves hitting that wall of this isn't working, instead of pushing further down that path, sometimes it's better to just get off the path and go into the center of the circle and just observe. How am I feeling right now? What's working right now? What's not working right now? Is my vision still the vision that I had in mind? And if it isn't, okay, let's change it. Let's evolve it. Maybe I don't know what it looks like, so I'm just going to sit and observe for a little bit. I know this one thing isn't working, so I'm going to stop doing that one little thing. And I'm really drawn to do this thing over here. So I'm going to follow that energy wave, and I'm going to do that one thing over here, even if it's unrelated to that path that I'm on my business. So I'm not asking you to understand this in a way of like, some of this will make sense and some of it won't make sense, right? And as we move into this 5th dimensional space, it becomes more like metaphoric, as it is like, here's the path that you're going to go on to get to where you need to go. So even if it doesn't make sense, I don't want you to get into the analytical mind of like, that made no sense whatsoever. I want you to just trust that that energy is being downloaded into your field. Okay. And I know this works because over the years of running this business, anyone who has ever worked with me has become psychic. And I've never taught anybody who's ever worked with me how to become psychic, but it's just happened. So the only explanation to me is either I hire psychics, or there's something in the field, in that space of working together, that's adjusting our frequency, right? And when we go back to quantum physics, we know that if you have 2 atoms together, they're going to move into frequency with whoever is the loudest frequency, right? So if we can keep our frequencies high, we can stay in that positive frequency, and we keep our line of sight on the life that we want to create rather than the business we want to create, then we're going to continually be moving that energy in that direction. Because you all have the capability to be like millionaires, billionaires, if you wanted to, right? And you could keep that focus on the business and the money side. But the challenge that comes with that is sometimes it comes at the sacrifice of your freedom of time and your time with your family. And that's not what any of us want. So instead of focusing solely on the business, we want to focus on how do I want to feel and who do I want to be, and let the business just become a component in the wheel that goes around it, right? So if you view yourself as the sun and all these components of your life as the planets around you, you are the gravity pull, right? You're the one that's holding gravity in place. So as long as you know what your gravity is, you know what your anchor is, then everything else is gonna come into alignment with that. Does that make sense? Somewhat. I can tell you're all thinking.